I got
Cool.
it.
So my name is Dan Greenhaus. As everybody can see my slide, I'm hoping. I'm a former senior enterprise applications analyst for an anonymous mid-sized financial institution. I say former because I recently changed jobs, and anonymous because that's what HR told me to do. This is my contact information. My topic is going to be using PowerShell to automate for a better world. So, a couple disclosures and disclaimers. I always put these in here. Not speaking on behalf of any company, town, county, state, or country that I've lived in, worked for, or driven through during my lifetime. And any opinions are presented of mine and are not of any agency, town, county, state, country that I've lived in, worked for, or driven through during my lifetime. I know people think I'm kind of weird for saying that, but apparently people seem to not always understand that. So this way it's out in the open, there's no questions. So my topic is going to be how to automate stuff. So from some of my backstory is I've been working in IT for probably about 7 years now, primarily desktop support, help desk. I've done a couple of years as a sysadmin, desktop engineer, and then I got this role. And basically what ended up happening was my boss said, we need to upgrade one of our core applications. And I'm like, great, this sounds exciting. What do we do? And he's like, everything on a one-page sheet of paper, saying these are the steps that we need to follow. And I'm like, great. I'm moderately technologically competent. I can figure this out. He's like, well, okay, cool. So we ended up doing it together because he knew the process inside and out. So here's what the process entails. We had to take some snapshots of servers, just the 4 that were listed. We had to back up our database. We had to schedule a blackout in our monitoring software. We have a file transfer system. We have to pause those queues. We had to stop some services also on some surrounding servers. And then we needed to log on to the file server and close any open. And once this is all done, this is all of our pre-work. Once we're done, we then need to restart everything. We need to test the systems to make sure it works. We got to remove the snapshots, start surrounding servers, and resume network monitoring. Now, previously on our snapshots, we actually had an issue where people didn't remove their snapshots, and our infrastructure team found out that some people were really bad at removing their snapshots. So we kind of got talking to saying, hey, you kind of need to, otherwise bad stuff will happen. So we said, okay, we'll be more cognizant of it. So when we started doing this, we figured, hey, we'll do it during the daytime. It's a test environment. We have multiple environments. Let's see what we can do. And after the first 4-hour run, I realized a couple things. My boss used RDP to connect to a lot of servers, probably in the area of like 5 to 7 servers to do various things. He also connected to our VMware server to take snapshots of all these servers. And my boss, who was a great guy, had one really big weakness. When it came to documentation, it was not his strong point. So a lot of the stuff that he was doing weren't really documented at all. So you guys remember our original steps. This is what it actually was. We had to take snapshots, we had to back stuff up, and none of this was written down. So the services that were written down were not actually specified. Then there were other steps that we had to do also, especially towards the end. Once this was done, we went to our cleanup section. And as I'm looking at this and I'm seeing him do it, I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I asked him, when's our next upgrade for the environment? And he's like, probably in a couple of weeks. I'm like, okay, let's see what we can automate. Let's see what we can do. Because this was the first step that we had. We had to back up our servers. And right now we only had 4 listed, which is fine. But we were missing a lot of our servers to be snapshotted. We had these 4, our app servers and our API servers, not our disaster recovery servers, not anything else. And it's like, still, I'm thinking from a sysadmin's perspective, how can we do this better? So I said, you know what? let's script it out. So we put this together, and we're using the VMware PowerCLI. I used the VM automation.core PowerShell module, and I said, you know what? Let's connect to it this way. And what I ended up doing was, instead of manually putting in my credentials, I used the import CLI XML little utility to save my credentials as a variable. And then I did my connect VIS server, and that basically allowed me to connect to the VMware server directly. And afterwards, we ended up moving one of our servers. So I was actually able to connect to a second VMware server and pretty much control everything all from one PowerShell interface, which again was a lot easier than logging into each individual server and then trying to actually take snapshots, because from the GUI, same thing as anybody who takes snapshots knows, you got to find the server and manually take a snapshot. Doesn't take a long time, maybe a minute, but when it gets bigger and you're doing multiple ones, that becomes very tedious. So this was my code for taking the actual snapshot of the servers. So we have our app test VMs, because again, you can't use the VM names. I'm sorry, you have to use the VM names, not the DNS names. So I was able to save that. So in this case, I have three VMs that I need snapshots for. And I just basically made a for each loop and ran through each individual server and took a snapshot of it. So, and this was in our test environment. So when we went to production, same thing. Although in production, we have more servers, so I just had to add more options. So instead of taking a minute per server, I was able to run this code and take snapshots of, I don't know, 8 servers in the span of 15 seconds, which I thought did two things. Number one, this way we have a record to make sure that we actually took a snapshot of each server, and we don't have to like go hunting and pecking for each individual VMware environment. Our next step we had monitoring, because again, most large infrastructures have monitoring, but we knew we were going to be taking down some servers for the installation process. So what did we have to do? Well, I could log in manually to the system and find each individual server, or we could script it out. So we actually used SolarWinds in our system. So I found a script on the SolarWinds forums page, and I was able to take all of our surrounding servers and put them into maintenance mode or unmanaged mode, so no alerts are going to be triggered for 60 minutes. And again, this is only like 5 servers, 6 servers, no big deal. But you look at it, when we went to production, we had a lot more. So before we did this, what ended up happening is we would try to update these servers as well as modify stuff, stop services, and we get errors. So this way we could say we're actually tuning our alerting system so we're not getting these false alerts. So our next step in the direction said we got to stop some services on surrounding servers. And my boss, to his credit, he would RDP into all these servers. Then he would open up services.msc. He'd find the service, he'd right click on it, and he'd stop it. And he'd repeat for every server and hope he didn't miss one. And again, I don't fault him on that because we're all human. But it's very easy if you're doing like 5 different services on a server to skip one. And we also had some of our servers hosted web servers. So we had to kill IIS. And that's what he would do. He would RDP in and follow the steps. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So we did. And this is what I ended up doing. I have used invoke command, dash computer name, and the particular server name, dash script block, and use the PowerShell command, stop dash service, and then use the service name, and pretty much I'm able to run all this from one computer. And the same thing for our loan origination servers, we have IIS running. Well, how do I stop IIS? You can open up command prompt from the server, IIS reset /stop, or I can incorporate it into my little script here. And this was our test environment. When we had our production environment, it's the same thing. So we wanted to make sure that everything was consistent, and we had some additional servers also. So we had to make sure that they were documented well, because we had two of these servers, our multi-point and our CRM PRD-101, they're only in our production environment. So I need to make sure that during testing, we're not going to take down our production servers. This way, I can make sure that that was done. The next step we had to do was close all the SMB connections to our file servers. And my boss, to his credit, what would he do? He would RDP into the file server, open up Server Manager, go to Computer Management, open the files, find the files he wanted to close, select them all, right-click, and close connections. It does work. No arguments there. The problem we ran into is if somebody reestablished a connection, such as during a test environment, it would cause our install to actually crash. And we didn't want that. So I said, you know what? We might have 100 file connections open. How do we close them all in bulk? So this is what we wrote, is a little PowerShell script. We used our get-smb open file commandlet. And we selected the file server. Then from there, we did a where object and used the path of whichever environment we're in, took all those results, piped it to close SMB open file. So what had been taking, I don't know, 2.5 minutes was down to like 6 seconds. And we have multiple environments. We have our test environment, our dev environment, a stat environment, and a train environment. So depending on what environment we needed, we're working on, we just highlighted the same line and ran it. And that pretty much closed just those files, because that was the other issue. Because our file server was all on the same server, all these environments were sharing one server. I don't want to close a prod connection when we're just doing test, because again, it impacts operations. So this way, we made sure we weren't going to do that. It would only shut down the connections to this particular environment. For production, it was very similar, but we just had a line, and literally it's e:/app/prod, everything that connects to that folder on the file share, close. And we only did that during our production upgrade. Also, these production upgrades are done at 3 a.m. in the morning. Now, I don't know about anybody else. 3 o'clock in the morning, most of us aren't on our A game. So when you're following the directions, it's easy to skip something. If it was scripted out, it's a lot harder to miss something. So this was all of our pre-installation steps. And once the update was completed, we had some more steps we had to do, because the application upgrade took probably about 2 to 3 hours. But if you didn't do all the pre-work, you'd probably get about an hour of the way through, and then it would crash, and you have to recheck all the pre-work and let it run. So once it was completed, we had to do some more stuff. Just like before, we had to turn back on all of our services. Just like before, instead of using stop service, we used start service. This also gave us an output on what was going on. So if there's a record, hey, did you turn on this service? I could look on my report and see what services were turned back on. This was our test environment. This was our prod environment. As you can tell, they're just different server names. So we had to make sure that they all worked and started up as expected. There were more in production. And once I was all done with our services and we restarted IIS, we had to re-enable our monitoring. So previously, I had it set where in test, it would end after 60 minutes. Our production would end after about 4 hours. If I wanted to manually start a monitoring up on all of our servers, this was the script I needed to do. And it's pretty good, because if I needed to add more servers or change a server name, I could just add it to this list. And again, run the whole thing, and it worked pretty smoothly. He also told me about a special case that he had, because there was a web config file that we had to modify. And this was one of those not documented things that need to be done. So again, 3 in the morning, and you don't have it documented, how are you always going to remember? So I said, there's got to be a way to automate it. So this is what I did. So we had four app servers. 2 of them were in production. 2 of them were in our DR environment. So what we ended up doing was copying that file from the install location to the user's desktop. From there, we actually would parse the entire web.config file for this line, core.cc processor, and we would take the new location, which actually, I'm sorry, I should rephrase that. We would take the old web.config and copy to the desktop beforehand. Then we would take the new web.config from the installed application and make our changes. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to take the line that contained core.cc processor and replace the newly installed applications line with the old one. I believe it had some username or something that needed to be passed on, as well as we had this variable for max array length. We just needed to double it. Now, could I have dug through the GUI, gone to program files, company name, the website, etc., and change it? Absolutely. But at 4 in the morning, do you really want to be doing that? Or do you just want to run this command, which is basically just a whole bunch of get contents, find the object using select object, expand the whole line, swap the lines out, change this variable name, and then set the content back in our application, and then clean up after yourself by deleting your web.config. This took probably about 8 seconds on a bad day. Once this was all done, we had to do more IS resets. And previously, we were just going RDP into each individual server and doing an IS reset and waiting. And that was about 4 different servers. So I just added these little sections in, and it pretty much were 2 different sections, one for the production servers and one for the production API servers. So these are the application servers or API, depending on what needed to be restarted. A lot easier than trying to actually manually do it. And it worked pretty well. In the final section, because we had that snapshot issue, I'm actually able to remove all of our snapshots. So just like before, using the exact same variables, I'm just basically using a similar for loop to remove the snapshot names, because we have a standardized naming scheme. So instead of going to each individual snapshot in VMware, I can actually basically remove the command using the remove-snapshot commandlet. And I still have a record here under my right host, removing snapshot. Here's my snapshot name for this particular VM. So we were actually able to clean up after ourselves. And as I mentioned earlier, I wanted this to be as future-proof as possible. So I made sure to add some how-to directions, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's going to be doing this. So I want the later generations of people, whoever does this, to use this resource. So this is what I added: a full thing, a synopsis, a description of what it actually does, a little updates, and basically an example of how to run it. Because this clearly says, don't run this script from the PowerShell command line. We have step-by-step directions. There's a corresponding Word document that says what to do. So that's pretty much how we tried to automate at least like 4 to 5 sections of what we did. And the script itself is this. So it's just a regular PowerShell script. And the way it's set up is our top part is all about connecting to VMware. That's all it is. So if we need to change usernames, great. So this particular .cred file is actually something I found online, and it's great because it encrypts using the Windows API for security. So this only works for my credentials when I'm logged into that computer on that particular computer. So when my coworkers actually wanted to run this script, this failed. And it failed because they need to have their own .cred file. So our security was maintained, but it was still as automated as can be done. And as I mentioned before, the entire top half of this is all of our test system. So all I really have to do is highlight what I want and press F8, and I'm connected to our VMware connection. If I want to actually take the snapshots.
So if going back to that credential thing, so you could effectively put, like just a generic name and then just, hey, my cred, and then that it's kind of be transportable. So how did you create that cred file?
So there's a way you got to export the CLI XML, and the way it works is there's a whole syntax, and I can send whoever wants it. It's actually in my PowerShell. I guess it's called admin.ps1, just arbitrary name. So I save my username and password in the. I don't save it. I just run it in that syntax. Mm-hmm. So I believe it's username and password, and then it just picks it up, and the output is this is the file name. So for example, this is my .cred file. If you logged onto this computer and tried to run this script with admin rights and everything, it would not work for you because your login name can't decrypt this cred file. It only works when I'm logged in. Make sense?
Yep.
Have you considered prompting the user to select their own cred file?
So I can, and they absolutely can. The whole idea behind it was they'd have to actually create it, and if they do want to change it, all they have to do is change the file name and the file path. So this file was actually saved on the server, so they would have to modify the credential file location to where their file was, and run it.
Yeah, so I think a couple options there, for people who are trying to kind of reproduce what you've done is, is to test if the file exists, and if it doesn't, then prompt for credentials and then write the file back. So then the script itself can actually build those files if you wanted to keep them. Or somebody I think is also mentioning in chat as far as, you can use secrets management and kind of use a secret vault and say, go get my credential from somewhere else. And so there's a lot of methods in which we do there. And so, yeah, it's an interesting way in which you did it there. And then everybody else who uses that has to change out that file. Or so yeah. Is it only one person running that script, or is it multiple people? How did you guys implement that?
In this case, it was primarily me or like one other person, my backup. But the same concept, because we had to back up the database, this technique can be used when our DBA actually wants to take his snapshots and his backing up of the database, because this way he doesn't have to manually type in his 85 character password. And that was a big thing of, hey, I don't want somebody to have to fat finger their password at 3 in. This way we can say, save your .cred file. And even if you open the cred file, what ends up happening is the password is encrypted, the username is in clear text. So not much of a security issue on our side, and it helps to minimize any hiccups. But you're right, I probably could set it up where you can do a drop down, but from a work standpoint, I figured it was just easier for them to modify the path.
Yep. Cool. I just thinking points through there. Keep going. You're good.
So cool. So just going back, this is how we did it. So when I wanted to run my turn off monitoring, highlight this and press F8. Same thing with our services. A couple of my little notes here. This was an interesting comment. So this MPI41 is actually the service name. So it took me a little bit to realize that the stop service is actually looking for the service name, not the display name. And yes, I could do dash service name or display name, but this way, for consistency purposes, I wanted to make sure that everything was the actual service name. But this is why I left a little note. Hey, the display name is this, even though you have to turn it off. Again, this way, the next person who looks at this will say, this is how everything works.
So in this script itself is you wouldn't, or somebody who's running this, and you said it's 3 o'clock in the morning, shouldn't be running this. They they copy or they highlight certain sections and they F8 through the script.
Correct. Itself. Yeah, the example clearly even says, don't run this script from the command line. And I could have actually probably made it into functions. It says, if you want to do this, press 1, press 2 to run various sections. I just didn't do that because this worked fine for me. And I want to know what happens. I want to see if there's an error message, if there's a successful message. Yeah, the whole idea is whatever you're going to do, highlight it, press F8, and it runs it. You get an output report on what's actually going to happen. That was my whole plan on that one. This was the same thing. These are commented out. So if somebody did decide to run all these, only the uncommented one is going to do it. If they want to run a different section, like this is our stats section. You run like that, you press F8, and because I'm not running the hashtag # it does what it needs to.
I think one of the other suggestions I want to put up here is that the idea is that something in this kind of controlling script we do is it would be a good idea to put like break at the top of the script so that even if somebody hits F5, it won't run the entire script. And so if right now, if you hit F5 by accident instead of F8, it would try and run the entire script and try to do a bunch of stuff. So if you're writing a controlling script, it should not be run as a whole. I think it's good practice to actually put breaks in it so that it breaks wherever. So if you highlight more than you should, it will automatically break where you don't want it to break, or then you highlight just after the break and stuff like that. So
that's actually a really good idea. If somebody does run this like the whole thing, it would have issues. You see a lot of red error messages just because of how it was laid out. And oddly enough, you're probably going to have stuff. It's not going to be that big of a deal because it's just starting and stopping services. But totally, I mean, you want to prevent that from happening. I actually recommend that to my boss, saying we might want to add that in.
Can I offer one addition to that?
Sure.
When I do scripts like this, the top line of mine is always a return statement with a string that says, don't run this script, highlight and copy the parts you want. And so if somebody just blindly runs the script from the command line, they get some feedback immediately what they're supposed to really do. So it's an add-on to the breaks that Phil was talking about.
That's a good idea. I'll actually add that in.
Actually, I like that return instead of break, because I've always used break, but actually I never thought to use and return a message that says don't run this.
Don't do that. So, and hopefully the other thing is this is not supposed to be ran just from this. That's why there's the corresponding like Word document directions. So hopefully they're finding this, because again, it's I think checklist.docx or app. I think this is what it is. And this clearly says don't do it, but I think great idea saying in case somebody does not follow the directions, there's an additional reminder and hopefully they follow it. But that's why I tried to add this in my how-to documents of saying, here's your notes, here's any potential issues.
I think it's a good suggestion just for others who are, looking at building some controlling scripts. Typically we call these controlling scripts, is because it's doing a whole bunch of other stuff. It's not just a single function in like a module. You can create, individual parts, and I kind of see you can create like little functions in here and kind of shorten some of this code down. But I think it's a good learning experience for those who are, pretty new to PowerShell at that point. And, you could certainly, pause some stuff here and that kind of stuff, but just learn that, in these controlling scripts is that you may not want to run it all as piece, but then also it is perfectly acceptable to just run pieces in parts. And so just want to put that out there.
Absolutely. I will definitely take that. Yes.
Yeah, one concern that I had, and this goes back to the prompt for user credential, was that if somebody else other than you is running this and they make a change to the script, that does not necessarily bode well for the next person, probably you, that does run the script, that may not know somebody else made changes to your script.
Yes, and that is correct. The script is kept on the server in a scripts folder. Yeah. If we had a
if it's a read only, so that their changes are only in the VS Code session, yeah, that may work. Or if it's some password protected in terms of right to the file, but this is basically a production script, and requiring people to make changes to the production script, that's a dangerous thing for the next person down the road.
So funny story about that. I agree with you 100%.
You could share that with your boss too.
Well, no, the reason I'm saying that is we're actually, or my former employer is actually implementing a document or a script storage system. So to exactly prevent what you were saying, so instead of it being on a server, it would be in our script repository, I guess. So all your versioning would be tracked. Who did it will be documented, and people would have to check in and check out various various files. So in theory, that wouldn't happen. You're right. I do 100% agree that if somebody does make changes, yeah. But that's why we were implementing the script repository with the whole processes and stuff, because if somebody does do the wrong thing, it could cause issues. And I cannot disagree with you on that one.
No, I think it's great. Even this is a good opportunity for everybody to not so much look at ways to feel like Dan, like, hey, you could do this and that kind of stuff. Is that know that through this whole process is that there are multiple ways to do a lot of things in PowerShell, and especially depending upon your environment, depending upon who's running it and when it is. And to your point, Dan, is, hey, this is good enough for me. And know that when you're writing scripts, hey, good enough for me is absolutely good enough. But also if you're sharing with other people, once you add other people involved, then sometimes it is better to, or try and do to the best of your abilities to, think about the next guy going down the road. Hey, if somebody else is going to run credentials. Another thing that somebody brought up in chat was, even right there, you're doing start and stop services, but you're just putting a name behind it. Well, you kind of alluded to later on is that, hey, based upon the display name or based upon the actual name of the service. So, in some places you're using the actual property name. So like, minus VM, minus name, you're using those property names, but in start service, you're not. Now, for you, it's good enough. But it's not. Sometimes it's not that readable at that point. But also it can cause confusion later on. But again, that's not to say that what even you did, Dan, is wrong. It's good enough for you, and it's good enough for that. And so just for those who are new to PowerShell, or even those who are writing their own scripts, is just understand that you can do those things, and it's okay too. Or don't think that, oh, my code is not good at all, or it is good, but think through if it's good enough for you, who cares what it looks like? But once you want to share with others, you certainly want to do your best to, make it as transparent as possible. Those are my 2 cents.
So noted. One other thing, and this is why you shouldn't run this all at once. This whole section is just for test environment stuff. So if you do run it, and this is where I might even say, if I put the break thing, this is going to cause issues, because this half is all production, or this is all test, this is all production. So similar stuff. And here's some more stuff about our web config files.
So I think another good suggestion there, Dan, sorry to cut you off there. I'm sorry. I was saying you could do regions. Is you can highlight, and if you're using a code editor at this point, you could make regions, and then that is also usually an easy way to get your code at least visible, and you can hide all the regions that you don't want, unselect the region, and then run it that way. So that's one of the kind of tricks that I've done in the past, is for large sets of these controlling scripts that I've used, and so I use them all the time, and it really comes in handy. And there's a couple people in my organization like, what is this? I'm like, yeah, it works because I select out, line 5 for this, and then later on I'll select line 7, and it works really well. So I think it's a good job.
Cool. I might try that.
With appropriate breaks at the end of the region. Break statements.
Oh, so you don't, so it's just that region that runs.
Right. If you happen to highlight the region and F8 the region, that there's a break statement at the bottom of the region, so that it doesn't accidentally go beyond the region that you've potentially selected, or if you select multiple regions, it's going to stop after the first one.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely add it. Just going back to over here, this was our whole modifying the web.config file, and this content and this style I've actually used elsewhere when it's just modifying files, because we had some files that need to be passed along, and this actually worked well using various pipes and get contents. It actually worked surprisingly well. Just to pass those variables from the old files to the new ones. And then this is just our random stuff of when we need to do IIS resets. And here's my cleanup area, and that's it.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Do we have any other questions or comments? I think it's been I want to thank Dan for at least presenting what he's done so far, and I know some people have commented just, hey, you could have done this, could have done that. Don't think anybody who does presenting shouldn't look at hey, I made a change to my code and it could have been done a different way. Everybody can make edits to their own code, and it to that point is it's good enough for me. It's good enough, and don't ever think that. And somebody who shares their code, feel bad about doing it. It's a good thing, and I find code that I share all the time, and like, oh, that doesn't look so pretty, but you just own the fact that, hey, this is exactly my code and it works for me. It's good enough. So not that it was good enough. It's great. So good job, Dan. Great job. And I like some of what you did and how you documented it well. It went really well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Cool.
No, yeah. Thanks again, Dan. And so other people commented on the in chat about SMB file open. So that's been some people didn't know, and so that's really kind of one of the other points I want to bring up is that it was really great to have conversation with you prior to this meeting, in that we could all learn in some of the things that we couldn't do. So we talked previously, hey, I can connect to multiple vCenters and using some of those things in discovery, and it really does help in putting variables into places and discovering that you can do some things in parallel. And it really is a great opportunity to share your code with others so that you can get back experience and you can get back, feedback, knowing that, there's always some way to improve. And again, if it does it meet your needs or does it not meet your needs? And then you can use that same code for other places, like you'd mentioned. I've used this to modify other, config files. And we can do so much with it. Really appreciate your sharing.
And truth be told, the SMB open and close connections, I was like, there's got to be an easier way. When I found that, I'm like, it saves so much time, and a lot of people don't know about it. And just being able to run it, it's like, wow, that makes it easier. But yeah, the modifying of the config files, especially when you're passing it from one environment to another. I mean, my responsibilities was deploying an IIS-based app, and we have to copy similar stuff, and just having this already written out, and the logic was actually all there. Got to change some file names and maybe a variable name or two, but it's literally beats having to do it all manually. And if somebody does want this, I have no problem sending and saying, hey, this is what you got to replace with appropriate variables and in like carrots. Easy to do, and it could save you a lot of headaches.
Yeah, the SMB open file thing's awesome. Currently, like when we go to reboot services or servers rather, I'll RDP in and see who's currently logged into them so that I can notify them of the upcoming reboot. I'm going to use that to go find the open sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can use a Teams webhook to notify of the upcoming server reboot more easily.
And it's a lot easier to have that all as a PowerShell report where it's like, hey, I can copy and paste this list to Notepad versus, okay, I try to figure out who's actually connected to and what they're connected to. Yeah. Anything that I could help you, it's a great thing.
All right. Again, thanks so much, Dan, for sharing with everybody. We'd really want to thank Dan for sharing, and we'll have a good night. So, did he share sharing?
Hey, Dan, did you say you're going to share the code? We can throw it up in our GitHub if you want, or if you want to put it in yours, I can link to it for you.
Yeah, I will put it in mine, and if I can remember what my GitHub address is, I will post it, give it to Phil, and he'll post it somewhere that it can be accessed.